Okay.
I'm here with my good friend Coen Bester in Pretoria, South Africa. Coen and I have known each other since 1997 when we attended a business school program together. And it was a 3-year program from 1997 through 1999. And we were running our respective companies at the time. And so our knowledge of each other is is sort of a business relationship. And I wanted to spend time taking a deeper dive and getting to know you today, Coen. So thank you for
Hmm.
being here.
Thanks, John. Thanks. It's a privilege. It's nice talking to you like this. So, yes,
And
X-rated.
so here in March, it's quite cold in Denver, Colorado. And as we talked before hitting the record button, it's quite warm there.
Yeah, it's already late in the afternoon. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon here, but I suspect it's well into the 30s still. So we had the warmest, as everybody, the warmest January on file, and now it seems like we had the warmest February and heading into the warmest March. So something is changing. So yeah, no, but I'm jealous of your nice cold weather, but it's very comfy here.
Yeah. So, were you born in Pretoria or
Yeah.
okay?
So I'm a South African born and bred. So I was born in South Africa, as I think my predecessors go back to. We trace them down to 1670, and the first colonial person we were seen as the father of South Africa, and the old South Africa set foot on land here in 1652.
Wow.
So shortly after, my ancestors also settled here. Apparently they were all European, and of German and Dutch origin.
Right.
So yeah, so we've been African or South African, for our whole life and our ancestors. And I'm of the so-called Afrikaans tribe. Yeah, in the white population, we have two primary type of groups: the English or British sort of English speaking part of the population, and then the Boer or Afrikaans. My cat is just bumping.
I saw her
Afrikaans.
tail earlier.
Yeah, yeah, and we went to war in the 1900s with the English.
Yes.
Yeah, which is so why I say this, it's quite defining, because up to for a long time the Afrikaners and the English speaking people were like divided,
Mhm.
up to the 60s, I would say. And incidentally, the Brits killed about 30,000 women and children in concentration camps, 1900.
Really?
Yeah, it's the proportion I worked out relative to the Palestinian proportion was like a third of the women and children population was actually murdered in concentration camps. It was a big thing. It actually determined the future of South Africa to some extent, because the people say that it's equivalent of 3 million people today.
Hmm.
In any case, that's sort of a defining thing. So I grew up in the era, John, when the Afrikaners emancipated them after that 1900 war. And then they declared independence from Britain in 1960. And unfortunately, that was also the formalization of the, apartheid that, the world is quite familiar with.
Yes.
So I was privileged under the apartheid system.
Yeah.
I grew up without knowing anything about it, of course, but I was fortunate to the extent that the Afrikaner population was very industrious in growing a solid, let's say, a very strong people and a country and independent in mind in this African wildness.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a very good education. I grew up in the platteland, or out of town, small town, a rural town of about, I would say, 50 or 60 or 70 people. And then we moved to a port town, metropole called Durban, where I matriculated, and then I studied engineering at the University of Pretoria. So since about 18 or so, I lived in Pretoria up to this date. The trademark of Pretoria it's very much like Denver. It's got the same look and feel. It's a inland metropole.
Yep.
2 million people, I would say, but it's blue bull country,
Mm-hmm.
because the famous rugby team here is called the Blue Bulls. And we are sort of most of the time on top of the South African leagues. So that's, if you're in this country, you're in Blue Bull country.
Now,
So
before we leave your childhood, forgive my interruption,
yes.
what did your father do for a living?
Yeah, okay. So interestingly, my father he studied as a teacher and as my mom. And then we moved around quite a bit, because soon after he got promoted to a school principal of a small town, first of all, and then another small town. And eventually he became an inspector of education, incidentally in Durban, for what was called then Indian education. Okay. And he was part of a pioneer group who established, under apartheid, of course, Indian education as a separate, I would say, area of specialization. So I had the privilege of spending quite a lot of my youth interacting with the Indian population of Natal. Although it was under apartheid, there was no racism involved at that level, because my dad was really looking what's the best for the education of Indian people, and he was promoted accordingly. So that was quite an interesting upbringing. So I was not that acute aware of the negatives of apartheid, because first of all I was privileged, and secondly my dad was involved in Indian education. Indians at that stage was, of course, not classified as white. And today the Indian population is about the same as the white population.
Mm.
So I would say Indian, black, and what's so-called colored is about 10, 12 million, and then the black population is about 50 million. So yeah, educational background.
What did your mother teach?
My mother taught maths for the youngsters up to what we call standard 4 or so.
Mm-hmm.
So both of them were very dedicated teachers, and that's probably where I got my, love for learning and studying.
Yeah.
I was never pressed to perform, but I grew up in a household where the school system and schools and books and study was normal. So I think I got my love for research and study there. Yeah. So that's that sort of defined me, I think, in terms of what my parents did for me was really support me in giving me a good education. And although they were not, they were, like teachers, they were not like very rich. So I had to fund my own way to university with a bursary and so on. But the platform was there. So I'm fortunate as far as that is concerned.
Yeah, they modeled that behavior.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Were your classes in Afrikaans?
Yeah, so I was in Afrikaans. I was in Durban. in a very, very Afrikaans, let's say right wing, to the extent that, the Afrikaans population at that time was really, conservative. And we spend weekends, going around with pamphlets, fighting against the English language, saying Afrikaans should be spoken in shops and and in business. So it was a real like thing.
Mhm.
So I was very aware of my Afrikaans heritage and so on. So. That's and so obviously what one then does is that when you reach university, you go into the flip side mode. Okay, much to your parents' irritation. Then I saw when I went, we were forced to do a 2-year compulsory army stint. You were drafted by, you didn't have any way out. And that was at the time when South Africa started to experience quite an intense border war in the late 70s. And that's for the first time when when and the first parade in the army, when we rocked up there the morning, like, and they said, okay, it's Sunday, you're going to church. I think, okay, I know one church, and that's the Afrikaans church. And now they were like 50 different options in terms of, they were calling them out, Catholic, Jewish, Presbyterian. I didn't know that you get different. I thought, holy Moses, what's happening here? And then I soon joined, not formally but informally, I joined the Catholic community because I worked out that they got ice cream after the sermon, whereas the Afrikaners didn't get anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was quite a first sort of eye opener. And then of course one joins university, and then you liberate, and you start to see the world. And I got involved in, I always wanted actually to be a journalist. That's since sort of the last 3 years at school. Me and two friends, we formed our own little paper, illegal little school paper, and at varsity I soon I started engineering in the end, because my parents said, like, a journalist is too ghastly to contemplate. They are all the liberals and the bad influences in the world. You should study engineering. The country needs good engineers. So I ended up editor of the engineering magazine.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, John. I was, even at the end of my first year, I wanted to stop engineering because it didn't resonate with me. It was too clinical and, so on. And then I went to work for a paper for
Mm.
the 2 months vacation.
Hmm.
And I enjoyed it thoroughly. So I wanted to stop engineering, but, I had a bursary and so on. So I did well. So I passed all my subjects. But the yearning stayed with me, and I kept on writing. I eventually wrote a book also. But then later on, when my parents have passed away, I discovered some stuff in my father's library. It was sort of the memoirs of my grandfather. And although he was also a teacher, he was a part-time journalist. Okay. So he was writing for the local regional paper and stuff like that. So they never told me that this urge was not just by myself, it was something I inherited. And so that I had it in my blood. And
Yes.
it's just funny. I was a little bit upset at the time with my parents. They passed away already then. But so up to this day, I'm still very interested in journalism and in the published word. And so eventually, at this sort of very mature age, when I did my Ph.D. a couple of years ago, although it was in technology engineering, it was based on text mining and how to make sense of text a technical text on a large scale. So, you talk about being defined. So I was never a great engineer. I was from day one more interested in the managerial side of it, the people side of it. And of course, I had the technical knowledge, but I soon went into, management, program management, and system engineering, and let's say the softer issues, not making, not build. I'm an electronics engineer, so never before I was never interested in electronics. I'm not so interested in afterwards, but I'm very interested in engineering thinking, and I'm afterwards very glad that I studied engineering, because it's more the way of thinking that you learn, of course, at university, rather than the specifics of your subject necessarily. So I think that stood me in good stead through my whole life in terms of being able to see the system and how it fits together. So yeah, so I think that would be my defining sort of moments in terms of growing up quite conservatively with I think solid ethical values, although it could have been a little bit abnormal in terms of South Africa's context. And then I had the privilege of studying at a good university and studying engineering, and all the time South Africa was changing.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated in the late 70s, 77, and then sort of the country was in turmoil. It was really not going well. We were under international sanctions. We had a full raging border war. There were like bombs in shopping centers and stuff like that. And one doesn't know. So when I founded my company in 1990, it was like still in turmoil, the country. We only got into the new South Africa in 94. But you're so focused and involved in your life and surviving that you sort of just look at your job every day. So I started my company in 1990 amidst all this. And it was a little bit serendipitous also, but I had the privilege then to grow a company in the new South Africa and to be part of the transformation and all the good stuff that's happened.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's
When did you meet Louise?
early on. I met Louise in my first year at varsity. She was still at school, final year at school then.
Mhm.
And her brother and me studied together the first year.
Mhm.
I was in a hostel, and
Mhm.
he was a local town boy, and he invited me for coffee one afternoon. He had a car, I didn't. I had a bicycle.
Mhm.
And then we went to his home, and I saw this beautiful long-haired girl there, and that was it. Uh, it wasn't so easy from her side. It took me 7 or 6 years to convince her. Uh, Actually, only 3. I think we got married. Actually, John, we got married when she was 20. I was 21. So yeah, so that's where I met her. She was a Pretoria girl,
Yeah.
and she studied domestic science. Yeah,
What did her parents do?
interesting. Her dad was also an engineer. He was a mechanical electrical engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think when they saw this engineering student arriving, they thought this must be a good guy.
Mhm.
Uh, so I could relate to my father-in-law to some extent easier than to my own dad, because we shared the same type of career.
Right.
Yeah, my dad was, of course, emotional supportive, but he could never understand how you could start a business technological wise and what is it actually that you do.
Right.
Whereas her dad was quite sort of a kind of a mentor and a good role model. He
Mm.
was a really good, I would say, classical engineer. And Luis actually inherited a lot of his mechanical skills. That's why I've outsourced all the maintenance in the house to her.
The thing that has struck me about the two of you over the years is we've gotten together, not just when we were in school, but years later at reunions. You're like two peas in a pod. You,
Yeah.
you're like a comedy team, and, and you've made me laugh many times, and we've enjoyed many a meal together. And
Yeah, thanks for that. No, we have, I mean, that was also to me, we have been married now for 45 odd years.
yeah.
And she supported me throughout my whole, let's say, professional life,
Mhm.
uh, especially in the phase where I had my own business.
Mhm.
So we have a very symbiotic relationship that's very energizing to me.
Mhm.
Uh, we're quite complementary to the extent that she's a homemaker at heart. She keeps herself busy around the house,
Mhm.
completely fulfilled by that.
Mhm.
She could see a big rock in the garden, and she opens the windows in the morning and say, "Look at that piece, I must move it today." And she will fight the whole day with that piece of rock, moving it from A to B. Whereas I can't find any meaning in an activity like that. So, so that's right. So she's a perfect mate to have because she stabilized me. She provided the environment in which I could thrive.
Yes.
And that's, I was so lucky with that, and also with the company. And the reason why I took her along to our meetings when we were studying at Harvard is like, I cannot cope without her, actually.
Mhm.
So whenever I traveled for my business over all the years, I always took her along. And later, when our son was born, I felt it's just not worth it to travel alone
Right.
and to be, I can't be my best in negotiations or anything if I'm not whole. I want to go home at night to have my wife and my son with me and decompress about the day and so on.
Right.
Uh, I think yeah, that was quite a blessing
You
to
complement
and
each other so
yeah.
well. Mm.
Yeah, so no, thanks for that. But that's it's probably, without her, I would probably not have been nearly as successful as the little bit I've been up to this day.
Your son was 13 years old when we got together in 1997.
Right,
Yeah.
right, and he attended one or two classes with us.
Yeah. Does he live close by, and is he married? And
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So we are fortunate. Uh, Very close family. It's probably my personality because I want to be I'm a relator. I like to have strong relationships with, a couple of people. I'm not like you who can woo everybody and have 5,000 contacts on LinkedIn. It's impressive, but it doesn't energize me at all. I would like to have 50 people that I know very well.
Right. Yeah.
So fortunately, he studied town planning, so he's a town planner. He's in the same golf estates that we are, just
Mhm.
like a couple of 5 minutes away from us. And he's married with two daughters, 11 and 5, and that's fantastic. We don't see each other during the week necessarily, but each weekend we have a Saturday lunch date where we go and have fish and chips together as a family. It's never tranquil. We have big discussions, big fights, but it always ends peacefully.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So,
that's I did you learn that from your mom and dad? Were there
I think so.
discussion
Yeah,
at the dinner table? I think that's
yeah,
valuable, and your son would say
absolutely.
the same thing. Hmm.
We had a rule when in our little family, me and Louise and Kunrad, that our sacred meal of the day was actually breakfast.
Hmm.
We got up a little bit earlier than most people, but we had a sit down breakfast. It was not just like grab a cup of coffee and have a meal, while you're on the train or whatever. No, we had a sit down breakfast every morning
Hmm.
to debrief about the day. And then, of course, we had a sit-down dinner every night. And I think those were precious, and I believe in that as an investment, is to touch base over a meal as a family, debrief, listen to each other's story, encourage each other, give advice, differ profusely, but you've got to have quality time. So that was a ritual, and I think that stood us in good stead. And I must say, up to this day, I've got a great relationship with my son, and I see them doing the same.
Mhm.
And I believe that the family is the core of civilization. That's why I think the American way of life is important to preserve the family. It's the nucleus of everything.
And we're struggling with that here in the United
It's
States.
struggling, yeah. But just talking about the United States, as you know, I'm quite in love with the States, probably because I don't get there enough. But I had the privilege of touring the States again like 2 years ago with some friends.
Yes.
We went to some of the major parks there. Uh, and John, I think, not to be over dramatic or melodramatic, is I really believe that the States is the last bastion standing in the West. If the States fall,
Right.
the West falls.
Yes.
I mean, I've got dear European friends, and I love the culture, but they are like, to some extent, very weak and vulnerable. If the States fall in terms of, to the pleasure of China and Russia and whatever, we can say that also. But the free world, the free world is looking towards America. So you guys don't maybe appreciate it, but when you're traveling and you come there and you realize our future in South Africa is so dependent on you guys staying upright
Mhm.
and carrying the Western flag, and the all those, liberty and those ideals.
Mhm.
If we don't fight for it, it's very subdued in Europe. And so I think it's really, really important that you realize, and I think the job that, and your mission that you're involved with and teaching me about is all about taking those values to the world also, and nourishing it and talking to each other as leaders. It sounds like very old-fashioned, but if we don't keep that culture together, I'm afraid that the West will fall.
Yes.
Maybe not in our age, but it's a real worry to me that we
Yeah.
don't appreciate what we have grown up with, and it's not guaranteed. It's very vulnerable. So yeah, you guys need to. I really I hold my thumbs for the States too, and
Mhm.
it's going through difficult times right now.
Mhm.
But I hope the spirit will survive.
It's why I'm so actively involved in Rotary International, the World Service Community Committee, Denver Council on Foreign Relations, World Denver. I think one of our many challenges is that we're far too introspective,
Yeah,
and we need to know what's happening in other parts of the world. We need to be better
yeah,
informed,
yeah,
and that's a daily effort. And so that's why I'm promoting these trips uh,
yeah, yeah.
here so that we can learn from people like you.
Yeah.
And so
And
that's
that's so important, John. Like, Americans are a little bit inwardly focused because you've got this massive economy and so on, and you generate so much wealth and technology. But the other thing is like culture is like, you can only experience culture when you're exposed to something different.
Mhm.
And that's why I think it's good for you and Americans to travel the world. It's not to necessarily only say, well, what can we learn from you guys? But it's to realize that you've got a special and different culture
Yes.
that needs to be preserved also. And traveling make you realize that you're different for a reason. And you see a lot of interesting people that you can help, of course,
Mhm.
which is the American spirit. But first of all, to realize that as a nation, you're different.
Yeah.
And you need to work on that like special difference, because it's when you go to the stage occasionally, you do experience this difference and the energy.
Mhm.
My old mentor, when I founded the company, was the ex-professor of the engineering department. But he used to say he's got to go to the States once a year just to get supercharged.
Wow. What an
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. And it's still to us to this date is we go to the States, it's interesting, you meet the people, you see the places, but the energy
Mhm.
and the work spirit still to us, the work spirit is so toxic, it's so toxic, you feel it and you cannot but want to do great things when you get back.
Well,
So,
that's
so yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's very, very inspiring. The States is very inspiring. You shouldn't underestimate that. Just by being who you are best, by being entrepreneurial, by going for opportunities. Although you've got crazy role models like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and those guys, they pitify the American spirit to us. We look up to those people with all their mistakes and faults because they're energizing.
Right.
Yeah, so sorry for that, but
You
that's
don't need to apologize, and I'm grateful that you made those comments. You reminded me that last night when I attended our networking night, towards the end of the evening, I met a surgeon, a plastic surgeon who
yeah,
works especially with burn patients, and he's originally from Poland, and he
yeah,
arrived here at age 11, and each family member had two suitcases, and they arrived in New York, and he ended up, of course, going to Harvard Medical School and becoming
yeah,
immensely successful.
yeah,
Today, he's 55 years old, thin as a rail, high energy, highly successful. And it's the immigrant that comes to this country
yeah,
that
absolutely.
provides some of the energy, and combined with the culture that became magical, that developed over time.
Absolutely.
So we
No,
have,
I
of
would
course, all
also
this discussion about protecting our borders, which we absolutely need to do.
sure.
All countries need to do that, combined with being welcoming at the same time. It's not
Yeah,
black
yeah,
or
yeah,
white.
yeah,
It
yeah, yeah, yeah,
is, yeah, thinking through these issues quite carefully. And
yeah,
hope
yeah,
our legislators come together to make the right
yeah, yeah,
choice.
yeah.
This policy
Uh,
matters.
yeah, I've got confidence that you've got enough diversity in the political system, although it sometimes look like they're losing it. I think the free market and the innovation drive is so strong that you will overcome. So
Mhm.
yeah, let's watch the space. I'm very optimistic actually about the States.
Good. That's
Yeah.
encouraging to
Mm,
hear.
mm, mm.
So, oh, by the way, before I forget, were
Hmm.
our classes at Stellenbosch still taught in Afrikaans or a mixture of English and
Yeah,
Afrikaans?
no, it's a mixture. These days, I think you don't have any university anymore that's exclusively Afrikaans.
Mhm.
So most of them, look, I grew up completely Afrikaans and I was lectured in Afrikaans, but of course all the books were English. So that doesn't make a big difference. So all universities are either now you can choose whether you want a class in Afrikaans or English. But the default is mostly English.
Mhm.
You're allowed to write in Afrikaans if you prefer Afrikaans examination. Okay. But of course, John, we have 11 languages in the country.
Mhm.
So Afrikaans has got a little bit of a inheritance privilege.
Mhm.
But so I think most people think that, look, English is the official business language
Mhm.
and it's also the government language.
Mhm.
When it comes to the courts and so on, you're actually allowed to be heard in your mother tongue. Okay. But it's, of course, a big challenge.
Mhm.
So I think about 50% apparently of the population can help themselves in Afrikaans. So it's actually a very well entrenched language, but most of us accept that in business and in school, you'll still have Afrikaans schools, but my two grandchildren are in bilingual schools, and they will go to English high schools.
Mhm.
That it's very much, I think, the equivalent of Hebrew, that we speak it as a grouping privately and as families,
Mhm.
but you conduct most of your life in English.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, so Afrikaans is slowly moving to the background. It's an interesting language. I think it's only one or two or three languages in the history of languages that could actually withstand English as a language in terms of not be overrun by it.
Mhm.
And it's also a completely scientific language.
Mhm.
It's,
Really?
it's a it's a full scientific language. You can express yourself scientifically at full, and also it's a complete law language. So it's a very, since it's a mixture of German and English and Dutch, it inherited all from
Mhm.
that. But it's a very well developed Western language.
Mhm.
So it's very exciting. I'm very privileged that I grew up in it,
Yes.
because it gives you a little bit of, also when we travel, we find ourselves away in Germany and in most of the Scandinavian countries. We can sort of, and then of course, when you travel and you got to speak privately, you can speak your language and then you can switch. But
You
it
do that to
actually,
me. You and
yeah,
Louis,
yeah,
we,
yes,
we need to get rid of this guy. And
yes, yeah.
I love to listen to the two of you speak Afrikaans. It's a beautiful language.
But the advantage also is it sensitizes you that you need to learn other languages.
Yeah.
Because you're a minority language and you can't get around in the world with your own language, from day one that you've got to be able to master at least
Right.
English.
Right.
A big disadvantage in the way I grew up, and it's changed since then, is that I wasn't taught a blank language at school. So I'm not able to speak a black language, which is in nowadays, although black people like Afrikaans people also speak English in business, but
Yes.
the fact that you cannot connect with a layman easily, and
Mhm.
hence you miss out on a lot of cultural,
Nuances.
yeah, nuances and so on. So that's a pity. Louise can speak a little bit, and that's a big advantage when she speak to our, people coming in to clean our house and so on.
And to form intimate relationships too.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
My friend, who we travel with, he's fluent in two black languages, and he also has a farm. And what a privilege to speak to his people, and to be so close to them, and then of course in terms of safety, he mixes with them and they tell him of all the movements, what's happening, what have they seen, and so on, something that you're excluded from. And I think it was also to a disadvantage of the country in this whole transformation thing, because if you can't speak to each other in your native tongue, there's a distance,
Mhm.
which is but I must say, South Africa has made a lot of progress. You'll see also when you come here in the last 20 years, it's a fully integrated society. We're not really aware of racism. Racism is something that the politicians actually at election time, like we're having now, they put on the agenda because they want to divide people and have their own agendas. But as you know, population in your daily go about, it's just like there is no racism or discrimination of any sort. It's actually quite a freedom experience. So the fall of apartheid also freed us white people,
Mhm.
the burden of the past. So I think if South Africa can just overcome this transition period, which was always going to be difficult when you hand over power and new people, new governments have got to find their feet. If we can get past this, I think the country has a magnificent future. We're not there yet. We're probably at the lowest point in terms of, everything is almost broken. But that's not said as a pointing fingers. I think it's just like something that was inevitable to happen if unprepared people had to take over government and find their feet. But we are as a nation, I think we are on the full foot. We are moving forward. So I'm quite optimistic.
You live in Pretoria, which is
Yes.
the administrative capital of South Africa.
Yes.
Tell me
Yeah.
more about that.
Okay. So our political system sort of has this legal governance side to it, which is in Cape Town. That's where the parliament is. So our politicians spend half of the year there in lovely Cape Town, where they pass laws and they debate in parliament. Then parliament dissolves and they move up, most of them to Pretoria, where all the administrative functions are done. That's where almost you govern from. So the president would have his office here, like let's say the White House is here in Pretoria, and most of the embassies in the country is in Pretoria or Johannesburg. Johannesburg is, of course, our big commercial. It was built a city built on the discovery of gold. Some 50 or 100 years ago, and this area is called Gauteng. It's the smallest geographical province. I would say it's around about, I would say, 10% of the country's what's the size, but it generates 10% of Africa's GDP. So it's really the powerhouse of Africa. It's not beautiful. It's like Denver. We don't even have mountains close. Yeah. It's more like Chicago then. Let's say that, but without a lake.
I'll let you get by with that slip.
Yeah, that's better, right? So this is the powerhouse. This is where things happen.
Yeah.
And Cape Town is laid back. Cape Town is touristic. It's got 2 oceans. It's got wine. It's got the mountains. It got everything. I work with a company there. I'm the board of a tech company there in the Cape Town region, and I said to him the other day, I feel so for them. I said, why? I said, look, heaven is going to be such a disappointment to you guys.
What a great
all of us here in Gauteng is looking forward to leave this place. But they're going to actually be so disappointed.
Yeah. Your first name, Coen, C-E.
Yes.
Is there a significance to that?
Yeah. I remember first of all when that the problem was going to the States for the first time, and also at Harvard with this name Coen, which I didn't know could be a problem. And that's how it's Coen. So that's why when I travel in the States, I call myself Coen. I like the Jewish ring to it. And of course, the Coen brothers is well known in the States.
Yeah, that's right.
So my full name is actually Coenraad, which is it's the Dutch equivalent sort of maybe for Conrad.
Okay.
So actually Conrad, I would say, is the root name. And it actually means, and I think John, you will agree with me, the literary meaning is the person who gives advice to the king. Raad is advice.
Really?
And Koen comes from king, Koenen.
Oh,
So I'm a kingly advisor.
how perfect.
Uh,
Oh, that's
uh,
great.
yeah. So my second name is Petrus or
Hmm.
Peter, which means rock.
Hmm. Hmm.
So and then my surname is Bester.
Hmm.
And you get best, good, better, best,
Hmm.
Bester. Bester is one step beyond best. So, so you see,
I'm glad I asked. This is great.
what a partner to have.
Um, I want to be respectful of your time because
Yeah,
we
thank you.
set aside an hour. Are there any final comments that you'd like to make? Any, have there been questions I haven't asked you that you think are important for us to know?
Hmm. Not really, John. I mean, we can speak about me for 24 hours, as you know. Now, I think important, if you're gonna show this to other people, I'm very much passionate about entrepreneurship, which we haven't spoken about. I had the privilege of having my own company for a short spell of 10 years in the tech business, and ever since then, I've been a sort of a little bit of an angel investor and a mentor for let's say startup tech fast growing businesses. So that's really my passion, and it's still the area in which I teach a little bit at this stage. But I also am playing around with some research in terms of technology foresight. So as to advise the boards of established companies regarding, what type of technologies at strategic level they should keep an eye out for. And I'm working on a sort of a radar, a technology radar that could like regularly, like a radar scans. I scan the technology landscape, and I'm working on a type of a robot style system to say, okay, this being your business, then watch out for these 10 technologies that are coming your way, and to this extent. So that's my passion research area, is technology and entrepreneurship. That's maybe so. At heart, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a sort of not very rule bound. I look at opportunity. I like to start stuff, and people that gives me energy, and that's entrepreneurs give me a lot of energy. So yeah, that may just parting thoughts, important for me that people realize that also, that's really my passion these days.
Well, you've given me great energy, Kuhn, over the years, and it is a real gift to know you and Louise, and
Yeah,
very much looking forward to visiting you.
yeah, I'm so looking forward to that. The
So
same from my side, John. As I say, the yin and the yang is your woo with my relator. That I feel energized when I hear about all your stuff, and I know John is doing that. I only have to do my little part here. Uh, yeah, so now I admire you for your networking capabilities and your energy. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to our relationship flourishing and opening up Africa a little bit.
thank you, my friend.
Thanks, John.